If you believed you had nothing to prove, what would change for you? Hello, sunshine, and welcome back to Paradigm Shift with Ayanda, a place where we reframe what is and reimagine what could be. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Let's paradigm shift together. Hello, darlings. Welcome back. As always, I'm so excited to have you back with me today. It's always such a gift. And something that I once learned, I think it was on Jay Shetty's podcast, is it's not I have to create, it's I get to. Like, what a gift. And when I feel the resistance, the fear, I woke up this morning with a sense of dread because I was like, babe, it's Sunday. It's the day to do the thing. And it's always so scary. But one thing that I have chosen, and I'm actually so proud of this choice, is I'm choosing to be terrified and to continue, to proceed, to keep going. And I think that is so delicious. You know what I mean? I think that there's something about that to me is very sexy, because if we are growing up in a society that wants to shame us out of making noise and out of being inconvenient and out of being uncontrollable in a certain way, then anything we do to defy that is probably going to bring up a lot of fear and a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment, because we've been shamed out of being ourselves. And it's really an invitation to be like, yes, I'm ashamed, but I'm continuing to proceed, to keep going. And I think that as an act of devotion and as an act of courage, it's something that I think is something to be proud of. I once heard a quote that deeply affected me. I remember when I was listening to it, stopping in my tracks and thinking, oh my goodness, I will never see the world the same way again. Oh my word, what a thing to say. And before I tell you what the quote is, I want to express to you my desire within this episode. What I want you to take from this episode, in case you do not stay with us until the end, is that you actually have nothing to prove. You do not have to do anything to make yourself justifiable, to make yourself worthy of being treated as a person. Because in our society, being treated truly as a person is very rare. Being heard, being safe, being given the ability to thrive and to feel included, to belong, to feel seen. If your voice is in the room, are you heard? Like, being treated, in my mind, as a person is a very rare thing. And so since so many of us are only used to conditional personhood, conditional forms of love and belonging, we do so much to try and prove we are worthy of those things. You are always already worthy. And I know it doesn't help, because this doesn't change your lived experience, your day-to-day. It's not going to say, okay, just because I tell you you are worthy, you're not going to necessarily feel worthiness or feel love or feel acceptance from those around you. But I want to tell you that you are already whole, and there's no achievement or accomplishment outside of you that will make you deserve to be accepted, deserve to be acknowledged, deserve to be made to feel safe and seen. You are a part of this universe, you are a member of the human family, and you have nothing to prove. I also want to invite you into the paradox of the attempt to prove yourself. The paradox being, in trying so desperately to prove one aspect of ourselves, we are inherently denying another. The paradox is that the dance is between the proof and the denial. And we're so focused on trying to prove ourselves that we are erasing a version of ourselves. We are not meeting that version. We are denying it. And I'm going to unpack why that is the case. But I just want you to let that sink into your being, the possibility of that paradox being true for you. And now I want to tell you this quote that moved me so deeply. In this book, which is about goddesses, and it's all about learning about the different goddesses, the different goddesses and what we can learn from them, she says this: every action on earth that humans take is either an act of love or a cry for it. Every action is either an act of love or a cry for it. Every desire, every attempt. And what I really love about this quote is it takes love as the highest form of our being, and it says that we are always acting from a place of love. Either it's because of a deep lack of it, that there are so many disguised cries for love in our society. Okay, so we're going to come back to this quote in a second. If you are listening to this episode and it's spoken to you in some way, as in the title called to you for some reason, I'm sure you've had the very human experience of trying to prove yourself to someone. Of saying, I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove to you that I can do this thing. And sometimes we try to prove ourselves to ourselves as well. I'm sure you've said to yourself, I'm not just going to do this thing. I'm going to do it to the highest level that it can be done. I'm going to be the quote unquote definition of a success in my field. I'm not just going to be a creator. I'm going to get to the 10K, the 100K, the million. I'm not just going to write. I'm going to win an award, or I'm going to publish a book. I'm not just going to dance. I'm going to dance on a stage. I'm going to prove to you that I can do this thing. But I want to ask, what is really at the root of your desire, of our desire to prove ourselves? What is underlying that desire, that drive? What will we gain once we get to that elusive place of achievement? What will we have access to then that we do not have access to now? So linking it to the quote, what if your desire to prove yourself is really just a cry for love? What if you have an inner wisdom that's showing you and telling you, because our highest motivation is to be loved, as in our deepest motivation. We will do so much for social approval, for belonging, for acceptance, for being treated as a person in my kind of ideal sense of personhood that so few people actually have access to. What if you are so aware that the support of the people around you is deeply conditional? It is deeply conditional on your ability to prove yourself as a quote unquote success in order for you to be worthy of the pursuit of that project at all. What if what you really seek is to be loved and accepted unconditionally? Yet that's so unimaginable that you try to access that love through this conditional form of it that so many of us have been conditioned to accept and to view as the norm. Conditional love says, I will support you if, I'll love you so long as. And I don't mean unconditional love in any sort of toxic sense. Of course, we all have boundaries and needs, and there are limits, as there should be. What I mean is that unconditional to what you achieve, accomplish, and do. How is it that we feel embarrassed to post things or to say things or do things or start things because of what our friends will think? And the natural question is, are they our friends? And the natural question is, are they our friends? Remember this paradox of proving yourself, that it necessarily involves denying a self. And what if the self that we're denying is the self that feels like we are unsupported by these people? So we're trying to artificially reach a place of being supported by them by doing the things that they need us to do in order for us to feel worthy. But people who are truly for us aren't going to make their love and acceptance and support conditional on how well we do at something. And then I want to dig deeper into this idea of the myth of proving yourself, suggesting that the attempt of proving yourself is not actually possible. It's not rooted in a deeper reality. It's rooted in an illusion. Because who is the self that's being proven? And who is the self that is lost and denied in the process? Because in the attempt to prove yourself as X, you are saying, I need to show that I am something. But aren't you already something? So aren't you casting aside the self that exists? Because what we don't want to be seen as is trying. We don't want people to see that we are trying. We want people to see that we have succeeded. So in so doing, we want to deny the process. We want to deny the attempt. And we want to favor the outcome and the external validation from that outcome. But we lose something in that attempt. We must. We're saying, I'm not this me. I'm not this podcast host. I'm the podcast host that's going to be in the top 100. I'll show you. Well, then what am I denying? That I'm a beginner podcast host. I don't have an external validation of success. I cannot point to anything and say to you, this succeeded. But I could hyper-focus on that one day, that elusive place where I will now be justified in my attempt to embark on this journey at all. So that's a cry for love, because what I really want is the love that's going to come as a result. I'm not saying that we're never intrinsically motivated, but I think specifically in this attempt to prove ourselves, a person who's loved doesn't need to prove themselves. A person who unconditionally loves themselves and who unconditionally is loved by their people has nothing to prove. And a person who is love has nothing to prove. As in, a person who is acting from love and acting as love, they don't have anything to prove. They have things to be and they have things to do because of that alignment. There's things they feel called to. But they don't feel called to be validated as that thing or to be proving themselves as that thing because they are already that thing or they're already whole within themselves. And I just wonder, like when we think of how success is framed in this capitalist world, how many people are just operating from a desire to prove themselves as worthy and as successful and as lovable? How many narratives do we hear across fields, athletes, performers, artists, writers? Oh, they always doubted me, but I was writing every single day because I said to myself, I'm going to show you. There was that girl in my high school, she would bully me. And I said to myself, I'm going to show her. You know what I mean? There's so often a narrative around proving oneself. That's very pervasive in our culture, so much so that it seems normalized. Like it's like, oh yeah, you're trying to prove yourself. That makes sense. Does it? Like, does it? In the world that we want to see, would that happen? Would there be people who need to prove something about themselves? So I wanted to write a little bit of a list today. And I thought to myself, okay, here are 5 things that I think we lose in the attempt to prove ourselves. Number 1, we are making our worth and the value of our efforts contingent on an outcome, right? Because in order to prove yourself, it indicates that you've reached some sort of outcome or place, usually. There are people who try to prove themselves through their efforts, but how many people see our efforts? They usually see the result of our efforts, or we allow them to see the result of our efforts. The fact that we reached a certain place, and that place has to be externally visible. It's not a spiritual place. It's not I've reached a sense of inner peace. You can't post that on the gram. You can't win an award for inner peace. So it's an external marker of success. But when we are locating the self in external validation and in externally visible phenomena, are we not in a way losing ourselves? Because we are locating ourselves outside of ourselves. We're saying I'll be valuable when I reach 10,000 followers. Is that me who's going to be valuable? And to whom? If a person lives their whole life for the award, for the reward, for the acknowledgement, for the accolade, but then you take the amount of time that we are externally validated, it's very short if you think about it. If you think about a writer, what they're spending all their time doing is writing. If they then publish the book and it does well, how long does that last as a representation of how long it took to write the book? Very, very short. If you think of an actress, like the process of acting is what really is the substance of their life. The award show or the reward or award or interview or whatever your version of external validation is, it's the minor part of the life that they've lived, time-wise, and even energetically. So I think we lose unconditional worth that's not contingent on an outcome. We lose the ability to say, I am worthy. Because many of us will not reach these outcomes we've set. I think there's this, a dream is an illusion. Like that's also a reality. Dreams are wonderful. Dreams are uplifting. But I think what we also need to understand is dreams are fake. Like they're illusory. And they can be extremely powerful, heart-opening, expanding. But they can also be a tool of manipulating people into always delaying, deferring the reality that they all actually want to live in. Because many of us will die or will just simply not achieve these so-called dreams because they're illusory. And not only the actual event is illusory, but the feeling we think the event will give us. But what I'm talking about is these accomplishments that are rooted in this societally driven understanding of success and what we think it's going to feel like if we get there. I'll give an example for myself. When I started my TikTok, I was like, okay, I'm going to reach, you have all the milestones and then the milestones keep changing. I can't wait to get to 10K. Now I can't wait to get to 50K. Now I can't wait to get to 100K. And it wasn't the only thing driving me, not at all. But it was something on my mind. I would look at creators who had a lot more followers than me and I would think, why not me? Now I really feel divested from that. I mean, obviously it pops up sometimes, but I feel like disconnected from it because now I know how I thought it would feel is not how it actually feels. And I know that with every milestone comes the ta-da, here's a new milestone. There's no arriving, right? It's a fantasy because it's set up to make sure that you're on this endless treadmill of milestones. So the second thing related to this idea of outcomes that we lose in trying to prove ourselves is we are sacrificing the magic and the joy and the mystery and the wonder of the process in favor of overemphasis on the outcome. We're saying what matters most is not that I'm writing every day. What matters most is that I'm going to publish a book and then be on the New York Times bestseller list or whatever bestseller list is top of mind for you at the moment. We're saying what matters most is not that I'm creating content each and every day, but that I'm going to reach 1 million followers. We're saying that it's not about our efforts. It's not about the fact that we're showing up. It's not about the fact that we're devoting ourselves to a creative project or to a relationship. The point is that we're going to get married. You know what I mean? The point is that we're going to post the Instagram photo of us graduating or getting married or being engaged. That's the point. But those moments are so fleeting and they really do a disservice to the substance of our lives, which is the process. Like if we really hinge all our desires on an outcome, how much of our lives, like if we, let's say, live to whatever age, how much of that lifetime would have been spent on receiving or experiencing outcomes? So little. Our life is the process. The process of something, the process of being devoted to a friendship, the process of being devoted to a creative project, the process of living, waking up. It's like a cycle. Everything is happening. It's not only happening when we arrive in this mythical place. So it's almost as if we're throwing ourselves away in favor of these minor moments where we are going to get to prove ourselves. So to that point, I wanted to find some quotes to add to the episode. And one of the quotes that I found is by an Indian philosopher, speaker, and writer named Jiddu Krishnamurti. He was born in 1895 and he died in 1986. And I wanted to share a quote from his work. And what he says is, the ambitious man is afraid to be what he is. So to make that neutral, the ambitious person is afraid to be what they are. And think about that. That's a quote that's short, but if we really sit with it, we can see the wisdom that is so deep in that statement. If you are ambitious, you're striving, right? You're like, okay, next thing, this thing. You are afraid to be what you are today. And I fall into this completely, like 100,000%. It's an active journey to try and not be this way for me. But if you are ambitious, if you are striving, there is some sort of detachment, rejection, denial of what you are now. And this is a way that ambition is never really framed in our society because, of course, like capitalism thrives on the notion of ambitious people. Ambitious people because they will act in very individualistic ways. They will often do things to harm themselves in service of this ambition. But if everyone was really not afraid of who they were now, if they were okay with that, how would ambition exist? Not in the same manifestation as we see it today. And this again is the idea of love. Every act is either an act of love or a cry for love. The ambitious person is crying for love because they believe, and they've been made to believe, that in that outcome state, when they've become the founder, the entrepreneur, the creator, the judge, the professor, when they've become that thing, then they're acceptable, then they're justifiable, then they deserve to be celebrated and seen and heard, then they deserve to be elevated. They can't stand the idea of who they are now very often, and the idea that that version of them is acceptable and lovable. And so then what happens? Often they reach that accolade and they have a mental and emotional and psychic and social crash because it does not feel how they told themselves it would feel. And now they still have to do the work of loving themselves. Because what's going to happen if we achieve our ambitions is the achievement of the ambition. It's not going to come with a whole conception of self-acceptance. Those two don't come hand in hand. Like, we can't achieve our way into loving ourselves and being loved by others. And so because the society benefits on us hating ourselves, we're often so made to be afraid of who we already are, and the understanding that that person actually is very lovable. That person is whole. That person is. And so as we balance the being and becoming that is the human experience, like, we're always existing, but we're always seeming to want to also become something else, become a good friend, become a dancer, become a parent, become in community with others, become wise. Like, we have this desire to become that's co-opted by the society and made to suit its ends. But how can we learn to become in a way that doesn't reject our being? I think if we can learn how to know that we are lovable, or at least know that we don't need to act from a place of lack of lovability, then maybe we will feel like we have less to prove. So how can we not reject who we are even as we become? The third thing I think that we lose when we attempt to prove ourselves to others, even to ourselves, is that, ironically, by defining ourselves through what others will think of us, we in a way lose ourselves. When I say to myself, okay, this person doesn't support my podcast, so I'm going to show them. Well, I'm the person who wants that person to acknowledge me as I am. I reject that and I say, no, I'm the person who wants to become someone that that person would acknowledge. So I'm letting them determine me. I'm letting their standards and their desires and their understanding of what makes a project worth it define mine. So we're basically saying, okay, I will be accepted by my family or by my friends if I do this thing. So I'm going to do that thing. So then we've lost ourselves. We're not trying to prove ourselves. We're trying to prove them, their desires for us. We're trying to prove their version of which version of us is acceptable. That's not us. It's actually a denial of us because we are the attempter. We are the trier. We are the one who's trying. We just want to pretend we are the one who's tried and succeeded. No, we are the trying one. Yet we reject this one and we lose ourselves in the process. We lose ourselves and we get swallowed into other people's projections onto us. So it's like, are you even the self that you are trying to prove? Or are you allowing yourself to be defined and swallowed by other people's expectations of you? The fourth thing we lose, and this is the most painful one to me as we think about love, is that we are silencing the voice within us that knows that we are surrounded by people who do not genuinely support us. And people whose approval we so desperately need because we're human, that we can't face the rejection that we feel from those people. Because if I'm a kid and I'm like, oh, look, I wrote this thing, and you're like, no. Why are you writing? Then we're like, okay, I'm going to go write so well that you won't be able to ignore me. That's pain, babe. That person doesn't support you. Like, we're so scared of people who are meant to be our people. We're so scared of their judgment. Like, on these conversations I've had with some of you, speaking about the fear you feel of being judged by your own peers, your own friends, that you are defying what people expect you to do. So you could tell yourself, okay, fine, then I'm going to go and do this so well that you'll be like, oh my word, congratulations. That is such a deep pain that we are actually silencing. And it's the pain of not being accepted for who we are, which is the trying one and the one who gets to try. Because if we only feel like we're going to be accepted as the succeeding one in this very narrow conception of success. So I just think it's so painful that so many of us know that the people around us are not really for us. It's so wonderful to have friends who genuinely support you, and not because you are succeeding. They just support the fact that you are expanding yourself. Like, as in, you're pursuing your fuller self, you're making noise, you're being brave, you're facing your fears. Like, that's an incredible, incredible act of love and courage. And I think that's what's to be celebrated. If we can't find people who will celebrate and validate the attempt, the process, the effort, but will only validate the outcome, the success, the award, those are not our people. Those are conditional supporters. And I don't even mean like those are people who are not for us, because people who are for us care that we are trying and they find it amazing. Like, why would we do things for the people who do not actually love that fullest us that we feel we are trying to be? Should we try to prove ourselves to the people who don't support us? Or should we be our fullest selves for the people who already do? And if that's no one right now, count me as one of them. Count me in, babe. I'm part of the team. Like, no matter what, I support you. Because I am you and you are me. As in, I've been there. I am there. I've been in that place of feeling ashamed. I've been in that place of feeling like I don't deserve to do this unless I can prove that I can do it to the quote unquote highest level. I've been in that place of feeling rejected in my creativity by people around me. You know? And what I can tell you is, if you really step into whatever you're trying to do, I don't know what that is, you are going to attract people who meet you in that energy. And I'm telling you this, I know this for a fact. You are going to be vibrating at a different frequency. Creative relationships rooted in a mutual love of something or a mutual way of seeing the world. They're very, very profound, but they only happen when we step into that fullness. They either happen through online relationships, people DMing you, or they happen through spaces you end up being in because you're now opening yourself up to that part within you. And so it's almost like now I feel like I know there's people in my life that I may encounter who will only see what I'm trying to do as valid if it works in their eyes. Like, it's working in my eyes, even though it doesn't have external markers of success, it's working. Like, I mean, in this pursuit of this podcast, especially. But I choose to not do these things for those people, because imagine that energy. I'm all about what energy we're drawing from. I don't want to draw from the energy of revenge. Oh my gosh, what an awful way to live my life. I don't want to draw from the energy of, I'll show you. You know, that's not the energy I want to live my life from. I want to live my life from as loving a place as it can be. We're so scared of falling flat on our face because we're surrounded by people who we know will laugh. That is not a calling to say, okay, so I'm not going to fall flat on my face. I'm going to soar. It's a calling to say, wow, I don't have the right people around me. I don't have supportive people around me. I have toxic people, not in the sense that they're inherently toxic, but they are poisonous to my creativity or to my being. They're poisoning the version of me that I want to become. They are toxic forces. I experience them, let's say, as toxic forces, because often we're projecting as well. Like, often it's really not them. Often it is us projecting onto them a judgment that they haven't even necessarily expressed. But often they really do express that they're going to judge us, or they already are. So what if this need to prove yourself is actually an invitation to be like, wow, I need to interrogate the relationship I have with myself, in the sense that, why do I only feel worthy if I'm succeeding? And that's probably something we learned in childhood. And of course, succeeding according to this very narrow definition. Or how can I say, I don't need to succeed. I just need to be. The fifth and final thing that I think we lose when we try to prove ourselves is self-denial. And I want to say this, we are just as much the self that is trying as we are the self that may succeed. Yet so often we deny the former self. Like I might say, okay, I can't wait to get to this place in my podcast because that's who I really am. Like I'm not this person who's trying. I'm not this person who's scared and daunted. I'm the person who's going to get to 1 million and millions and millions. I'm the person who's going to be on a world stage. That's me. I just need to become that. You know what I mean? So much of the self-development wording even is about rejecting who you are now because you're not actually who you are now. You're that person. You're your highest self. You're that reality. And it's a denial of the fact that we're everything and everywhere all at once. We are so many selves. Even with our past self, we deny that they had a role in who we are now. We just reject them. We say, oh, I would never do that again. I would never, that's like behind me. How can we integrate and incorporate all these selves and not see ourselves as things to be denied and rejected? Like, how can we be like, wow, I'm actually so many things. I cannot be singled out. I cannot be singularly defined. We deny the fact that we are trying to be or do something that we haven't yet been or done because that's so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable to admit that you're trying. It's so vulnerable to be seen in those earliest stages. And so it's an unsexy image of ourselves we don't want to adopt. So we create the illusion of the dream reality and we say, okay, I'm just working towards that. So what are we doing? Denying that we are working towards. And in that working towards is the implicit understanding that we may not reach, but we are still the one who is doing the working. And so we want to tell a story at the end. We want to say, oh, I'm in the montage phase. You know, this isn't the actual substance of my life. This is just a means to an end. No, this is our lives. We have to be able to sit with that because we don't know how much time we have. We don't know anything. We don't know where this is going. We don't know if a future version of ourselves won't even want to do this thing we're doing now. And we could actually invite ourselves into the understanding that we don't have anything to prove. So we want to tell the story at the end, but we need to realize the story has no ending. There are so many people who are quote unquote successful or who have reached their goals that still feel they have more to prove because they never worked on the fact that it's the fact that they feel like they have something to prove that may be the actual invitation of the desire to prove, not an invitation to do the proving. We need to embrace the question of like, what if I have nothing to prove? And although this is actually something very precious and wonderful, it's also very daunting because so many of us are fueled by needing to prove ourselves. So it's like, oh, if I don't have anything to prove, why would I create? Like that's what many of us think. Like many of us wouldn't write, we wouldn't make TikTok videos, we wouldn't make YouTube videos, we wouldn't do things if we didn't on some level feel we needed to prove ourselves. So I think reconnecting with that, creating from a place of wholeness, of love, of knowing that, you know, we don't have anything to prove. It's actually very, very profound. I wonder how many people in the world create or exist or get to exist from that place because we're made to feel like we have so much to prove. So I guess questions that I have for you as we wrap up this conversation is, what do you feel like you need to prove? Who taught you that you had to prove yourself? And what do you deny about yourself or within yourself in this attempt to prove a self? Whose self are you proving? And finally, using our imagination, what if you have nothing to prove? What would the version of you that believed that deeply, what would they be doing right now? How would they exist in the world? How would they create? What would they create? Who would they be? Like if you believed you had nothing to prove, what would change for you? What if you wrote a letter to yourself, from yourself or from someone in your life who you feel only conditionally accepts you? And what if you wrote the words you wish they would say? I'm so proud of your effort. I'm so proud of who you are and how you exist in the world. You have so much love to give. I'm so excited for you to channel that in whichever way you feel speaks to you most. I'm so excited for you to learn about yourself in this journey, for you to change your mind, for you to stop, for you to quit if you would like, because I love you unconditionally. You have nothing to prove. You cannot be measured. There's no amount of followers or comments or likes. There's no amount of book sales or reviews. There's no amount of awards or accolades that could ever define you, that could ever speak to the magic that you are, that could ever circumscribe all the love and the wisdom and the intuition and the creativity and the deep feeling that you have to bring. I give you permission to do whatever you want to do next, which could include absolutely nothing. I give you permission to create freely. I give you permission to post that thing you've always wanted to post. I give you permission to release yourself from shame and embarrassment. You are not shameful. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You are not embarrassing. You may feel embarrassed because, of course, you've grown up in this society that has shamed you out of yourself. But you do not have to listen to that shame, and you do have to understand that that part of you you're so ashamed of exists in me too. You do have to understand that there are going to be people who are threatened by your desire to be your fullest expansion, to make noise, to be loud, and to let your voice have a place in this world. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be treated as a person. I hear your cry for love, and you don't need to cry anymore. I love you, no matter what happens next. This podcast, this show, this screenplay could be the biggest success ever. Or literally it could not, because most things aren't. And I love you, because it is so courageous, and it is so wonderful, and such an act of love for yourself and all the selves you've been and all the selves you will be, for you to try. Every attempt you make, every time you try to record this episode, I validate. I don't validate how many reviews or ratings, or I validate you in your fullest existence. If you needed permission, here it is. Write the words that you so want to hear from others. Learn that you are many selves, and you can learn to relate to yourself as the grandmother, as the friend, as the grandparent, as the wise neighbor, as the healer. You are so many people. So I encourage you to send yourself a voice note of the words you are craving to hear from someone in your life. There's always someone or some people that we so want to be seen and recognized and acknowledged and validated by, or we want to be vindicated through, because we just know they're not actually for us. They pretend to support us, but they don't. So you could also write a letter from yourself to that person that you don't send or that you do. The wonderful thing about being sensitive is you really get to face the fullness of life and all its less than convenient feelings. All the things we would rather not have to experience. But I think the paradox of sensitivity is that sometimes that which makes us such expansive and powerful artists is also what silences us from creating in the first place. Because we can so potently feel the rejection of our friends, of our parents, of our families, before it's even happened or while it's happening. We're so perceptive, and we are so empathic and feeling that feeling that allows us to see and perceive the world in ways that can be channeled into writing and podcasts and videos and drawings and paintings and poetry and screenplays is the same sensitivity that's going to stop us because we're so afraid of the judgment that could come our way. And I want to do an episode on this, so that will be coming. Thank you to everyone who left a comment on my last video where I asked what episode you would like to see next. I'm sitting with those ideas. I've planted the seeds within me, and I tried to make it happen this week, but it didn't happen. So we're going to embrace ease and things taking the time they take, planting the seed, nurturing it, and then only reaping the harvest much later. So I've received your ideas, noted them down. Thank you so much. I love the comments. I love the feedback. I'm really grateful for it. And at the same time, I acknowledge that I have nothing to prove, but so much to give. I hope some paradigms have been shifted for you in today's conversation. As always, if you can, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe. I love you so, so much. Okay? I love you. Join me on my Substack. Links in the comment section. Go there. Okay? Love you so much. Love you. Bye.